All right, free radicals, hello. Welcome back. My name is Dave, and I am the Radical Independent here on YouTube. I get fired up after being on Twitter because I got people telling me, Green Party is led by a Russiagator. Well, all of you Bernie people, okay, just let's accept your premise, even though Howie Hawkins has clarified, and he's not the only candidate running. All right, and then we're hearing, the Green Party, they're going to rig their primary for Howie Hawkins. This is so obscure for most people. They're not going to know the names Howie Hawkins or Dario Hunter. All right, Dario Hunter is the candidate who's never been a Russiagator and doesn't claim to be one and doesn't make silly excuses like he was sleepy or dopey or hungry or whatever it was as to why he was saying certain things at that moment. But for all you Bernie people, Bernie was a Russiagator. So now you're saying, well, I'm not going to, but you were willing to support Bernie Sanders in the Democratic Party, which was going to go nowhere. But yet you're not willing to take a look at Howie Hawkins, whose platform is Bernie Sanders on steroids. And yes, Bernie Sanders, and we mean it. And yes, a Green New Deal, which actually is an actionable plan to get off fossil fuels by 2030 and to trend hard toward green energy production in this country, which would create thousands of good-paying jobs, permanent good-paying jobs. Look, as human beings, we struggle, I guess, with things that we're comfortable with. There were too many people on my channel, for instance, who were comfortable with Tulsi Gabbard. There are just too many of them. They liked Tulsi Gabbard. They're willing to kind of excuse some of the greener, more independent, progressive ideas she had because they were all excited about her leadership qualities and the fact that she seemed sincere about her loathing of endless wars. But yet she endorsed a guy who will be 100% regime change and endless war. 100%. I mean, you could say, yeah, I support the party's nominee. That's all you got to say. And then walk away from it. That's how you do it. You don't go, let's do a happy video. So people are all very much tied into those things that are comfortable for them. And when I say, even if Howie Hawkins ends up being, I'm going to say this right now, even if Howie Hawkins ends up being the Green Party nominee, he's light years better than Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And by the way, I guarantee you, 1,000% guarantee you, that if Howie Hawkins becomes the Green Party nominee, he will be called a Russian agent. So the whole Russiagate thing doesn't inoculate him from what's coming. Because, again, he's going to be the spoiler. And people are going to be far more motivated because this has happened twice now. It happened in 2016. It's happened in 2020. Pretty much everybody who is doing these independent videos knew this was coming. I knew it was coming. I was trying to tell Tulsi people, hey, you should really look at the Green Party because Tulsi was polling at 3%. And I'm thinking to myself, but they're so enthusiastic. This group of supporters, even at 3%, had the enthusiasm of someone supporting a candidate who had 40%. It was really uncanny because they recognized that she had certain leadership qualities that people really liked. That she was proposing legislation. Okay? So, yesterday Bernie drops out. Tulsi's out, Bernie's out, so where do you go? I'm having an argument on Twitter with a libertarian person. The libertarian person just keeps telling me, there are, ways that people can get jobs. They could go to work for a company and the company will pay them to basically do an apprenticeship. Yeah, some companies do that. But you're talking a very small percentage of the population that can kind of work their way up through the ranks, Not everybody has the means. Not everybody has the drive. Not everybody has the talent. Okay? There's some people who can drive a big rig and some people who can't. I mean, you could train yourself maybe to do almost anything, but you've got to want to, like, get up in the morning and do these jobs. I've always said do your passion in life and eventually the income will follow you, but a lot of people don't have that choice. A lot of people are born into abject poverty. Their geography holds them back. Their circumstances, maybe they created it. You can make this argument that, oh, well, the single mother with 3 kids, that's her fault. Really? If the dude ran out on her, that's her fault. Oh, okay. See, these are the things that people who are more libertarian, they gloss over. They're like, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. That's what you're supposed to do. Doesn't always work out that way. Folks, we have an opportunity. There is a party. I've been talking about this party. I was ahead of this before all these so-called progressive hosts. They weren't talking about Howie Hawkins or Dario Hunter. I've gotten more familiar with Dario Hunter on a number of positions. And yeah, he might not win the Green Party nomination, but if people start talking about him and getting his name out there and, telling other Greens that, look, if you want a candidate who is similar to Jill Stein, who's articulate, who's younger, by the way, Dario Hunter, I believe, only in his 30s. So again, this should appeal to Tulsi Gabbard supporters, that you have somebody, a man of color, by the way, a person of color, who has kind of lived this life in the trenches. He's lived that life, so he kind of knows what the working class are up against. And I'm focusing on issues, the working class, and also people who are just on the margins in general in our society, and those who have kind of played by the rules that have been set and are still going to food pantries every week. And I've been in those circumstances after Hurricane Irma. We were constantly going to the food pantry. My wife lost her job. My YouTube income had pretty much dried up like it's doing right now. So we may be in those circumstances again. You never know what's going to happen to you. And for someone to kind of dismiss it and say, yeah, there are all these jobs out there. And by the way, what jobs are there out there right now with the pandemic in place? Why is it that we have to institute a form of socialism every time this happens if socialism is so evil? It's not. Look, people say socialism is like communism. It's not. It's not. These are two different things. Democratic socialism, or what I would call tweaking the capitalism so it will run. It's like fine-tuning a car engine. All right? You're not changing the oil on a regular basis. That's when the greed and the corruption is corrosive and the engine breaks down. And guess what you have to do? You have to put in a brand new engine or take the thing apart and put it back together again. And that's what socialism, or these, I don't know, whatever else you want to call it, stimulus packages, that's a nice way of saying socialism. We're going to do some socialism. We're going to print some money that didn't exist, and it's going to go into the system, and that's going to supercharge that car engine again and get it back on the road, running smoothly. And it's free market. It's not free market capitalism. If the libertarians, I think, had their way, there would be no financial injections into the economy like this, which I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think if that money went to the workers rather than those on the top, who the government is in bed with, crony capitalism, subsidizing into certain industries that they like, picking winners and losers and so forth, that gets into a whole new area. And look, I'm libertarian in some ways, but I don't see how you're going to force people to be charitable with their money and their time and their resources. I don't know how you're going to reform the churches in this country. And the reason I mention them is because they've all been about these giant social clubs. These are basically huge buildings that go unoccupied like 5-6 days out of the week. And when they're occupied on Sunday, it's typically only for half a day. So to me, it's a giant waste when they should be fanning out into communities and helping the underserved and the minorities and the mother with 3 kids who did nothing wrong, wanted a family, maybe didn't plan great for a family, whatever. I'm not going to judge those people. The same people who might plan for a future and that future goes wrong for some reason. All right? It's called life. You make choices. Sometimes you make bad choices. And does that mean you have to pay eternally for those choices? No. I mean, if the Christian gospel applies, then there's grace and forgiveness and love and mercy and those sorts of things. Those are the cornerstones of the Christian faith, which aren't really being practiced anymore. What's being practiced for the most part is kind of like a Tony Robbins thing where you get encouragement every week and you go out there and you apply these things to your life and so forth. But it's not moving mountains. It's not like the Jesus kind of speaking truth to power faith that, really used to look after the poor and the marginalized, the widow and the orphan. Remember the widow and the orphan? You don't hear about the widow and the orphan anymore. What you hear about is we need to build a bigger church. So, yeah, I got off on a tangent there. Look, you may not agree with the Green Party on some things. You may think that you can just wind up the economy and tout the free market and make sure that all those things that make that engine run are running perfectly. Don't tax corporations. Don't regulate corporations at all. Look, regulations, some of them are important, like regulating what we're putting into our environment, for instance. That's a big one. Okay, that's one that I think you can't really skimp on. The temperature continues to go up. It's warmer and warmer each day, and people are just like, on average. Anyway, I'm not saying that you can't live in these conditions, but in some parts of the world, it's going to get pretty dicey pretty quickly. I don't think the libertarians really care about that stuff. So the Green Party, again, not to be a wise guy here, but the Green Party, even if you don't like Howie Hawkins, and I've said this a couple of times, based on just Russiagate alone, and some of this is Jimmy Dore's fault. I will say this, because Jimmy Dore is a voice of reason. He doesn't like Howie Hawkins. It seems like it's a little bit personal and so forth, but there's Dario Hunter, and I think until that primary is settled, and we don't know what Jesse Ventura is going to do. If he jumps in, it's game over, and we need a Jesse Ventura right now. With the choices that we have between Biden and Trump, Jesse Ventura would be a breath of fresh air, and our country needs populism. It needs somebody to talk about these endless wars that we're in. Imagine, again, if we had an infrastructure in place instead of this giant web that is the war machine. We had a healthcare apparatus that was ready on the ground when Corona started. Imagine the difference. And that's a war. That's a war that all Americans truly would be willing to fight and invest time and energy and financial resources to keep your communities safe. Truly, that would unite us, people on the left and the right, liberals, conservatives, progressives, just independent-minded folks in general. This would be a great point to reunite and get back together and talking about the things that truly matter. The question is, which party will do that? The Democrats won't do it. The Republicans won't do it. The Libertarians have some great ideas, but at the end of the day, working class folks, minorities, they're not gonna vote for the Libertarian Party. Libertarians are mostly wealthy, affluent white folks that have theirs, that have made their money, and they don't want the government taking it, which as much as I think that is a noble thing to some degree, it's not the be-all, end-all, because that's not how our society was organized. Our society was organized on charity. A lot of it is Christian charity or other faith-based charities. Those religions, for the most part, have abdicated their responsibilities, and they're not doing what they were put on earth to do, and what God has called them to do. They have just walked away from that and tried to just build bigger barns, to use a biblical analogy. So I want to thank people for sticking with this channel. The channel's content is going to be a little bit schizophrenic going forward because, again, I was talking about Tulsi Gabbard for months and months, and now here I am promoting the Green Party. And yesterday, I think, was a big day for the Green Party. It was trending on Twitter. We need to get to like 10%, 15% of the vote in this country, and we can do it. We can really do it. You could do it this election cycle if you stopped bitching about Howie Hawkins and just said, look, you were willing to vote for Bernie Sanders, and he was a Russiagator, right? So why wouldn't you come over to Howie Hawkins, who might have some Russiagate enzymes, but he's not going to get out there and make that the cornerstone of his campaign. He isn't. He's not going to speak to the neoliberal establishment and say, yeah, I'm one of you guys. Because clearly he's not, because the policies in the Green Party, the policies are what matter. And that's why, even if he was the nominee, I would say, okay, it's either Howie Hawkins or Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And that's what you've got to start to think about. Howie Hawkins could be a real player in this. And honestly, if you're going to get mad because Biden doesn't win and Trump wins as a result of supporting Howie Hawkins, which, again, a lot of these voters would not vote at all. If you give them something to vote for, they'll come out and vote. Otherwise, they'll stay home and it'll be just Trump and Biden in a vacuum, and the third-party candidate, you're not voting for anybody because you're not inspired. But what you could do, even if you were just building a movement for the future, a vote for Howie Hawkins and Dario Hunter, Hunter would be the better choice. So if, again, your state hasn't had a primary and you're able to go out and vote, which is obviously questionable, think about voting for Dario Hunter. And hopefully I'm going to talk to him soon, do a little interview, and see what his thoughts are on all of these things and a whole lot more. But until I do that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and yes, you can follow me over to PayPal, davidjspuria@gmx.com, if you'd like to give a one-time donation. Not looking for much, whatever you can spare. Times are tough. If everybody here, gave like $1 a month, I wouldn't be bugging you for money, or half of you, or even a quarter of you gave $1 a month, maybe via Patreon or PayPal, I would stop hounding people, but I don't have much of a choice. So, in any event, I'm here, and I'll be back again soon, so stay tuned for that.